Hello and welcome to Read All About It, the podcast where people talk about their favourite and not so favourite books. Join me, Paul Cuddihy, as I take each guest on the literary journey of their life, from their most cherished childhood read and a book they'd recommend to anyone, to the book they couldn't be paid to read again, and much more in between. So listen, enjoy, subscribe and spread the word about the Read All About It podcast. My guest in this episode of the Read All About It podcast is Alison McConnell. She's a football writer who, after graduating from university, initially started working with the Scottish Sports Agency. She then moved to the Celtic View, which is where our paths first crossed. And after 5 years at the View, which coincided with a very successful period for the club under Martin O'Neill, although he probably deserves more credit for that than Alison, she moved on to the Herald and Times sports desk. And for the next 14 years or so, Alison established herself as a top-class football writer in a profession that has, for too long, been considered a male preserve. Now, having made the move to freelance journalism, Alison continues to write and comment on all things football across a whole range of publications and media platforms. Alison, welcome to the Read All About It podcast.
Delighted to be here.
Now, I mentioned we'll obviously go on and talk about books, and when you sent me a list of book choices, I can tell people that you have and continue to agonise over your book choices.
I do. I think it's like anything I find that asks me to make a list, that sort of gives rise to a particular panic. I think I'm not a fan of lists. In fact, I actually remember discussing that with you over a Nick Hornby book, and I was saying every Nick Hornby book seems to be focused on a list.
Because High Fidelity is all about that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, we'll go into your choices, your many choices.
My many
shortly.
choices.
But I mentioned, obviously, I've known you for a long time. You've been working in football journalism for a long time, and it has been over the years. It's certainly still male dominated, and has that been difficult for you in order to establish yourself, or do you feel extra pressure in terms of having to prove yourself? Because sometimes people still have this kind of really old-fashioned attitude about women in football. Thankfully, that's kind of on the wane.
I don't think I do. I'm not sure I've ever felt it, or if I did feel it, I'm not sure it was ever a conscious thing to focus on it and make it a concern or a worry. I think I've always just thought I have to concentrate on my job and just let everything else take care of it. I think I've been very, very lucky to have a job I've loved, to have a job that I've liked. When I was going through university, when I first had done a postgrad and then graduated, I had a year of doing temping jobs, and I worked in McDonald's all from 5th year at school. Worked in jobs that were draining. A Sunday night you're thinking, oh my God, you're dreading going back to work. So I find myself very, very fortunate to have spent the bulk of my career doing something that's been a joy, really. Like, you're being paid to watch football and give an opinion. So I don't think I've ever felt pressure. I would say in recent years, as there were changes at the Herald and Times and I got to cover bigger games and there was a bit more gravitas about what I was doing, I think I felt that I had the respect of my colleagues. And I think once you have that, there's a particular assurance that comes more than any outside noise or outside perceptions. I think if you feel as though you're perceived to hold your own among your contemporaries, then I think that tells you that you're probably doing something right. But even when I was starting out, I don't think I ever wanted to be overly concerned about the female aspect. I remember at the very beginning, Karen O'Malley and I started together at the sports agency. She now works, she's a sub on the Sun, and I remember Karen and I were approached one day, I think it was a Friday morning at Ibrox, when someone came over to us and said, we would like to get you two into the Scottish Football Writers, because at that time women still couldn't go. I think you could go as a guest, but we couldn't be a full member or something along those lines. There was a political element to it. And I remember feeling a bit at that time, a wee bit self-conscious about it all, and also being very wary of being used as someone else's pawn in an argument. And then when I was working at Celtic, the football writers had a vote just to allow women guests to go to the dinner. By that point I was a member, and football writers were accepted members, but women as a gender weren't allowed at the dinner unless they were football writers, and that was challenged, and it got very, very bitter for a time. And I think the first vote lost by maybe 2 votes or 3 votes. It was very, very, very tight. And at that point, it felt awkward. And I was on a desk at that point at the Evening Times where every member of the desk voted against it. So I don't think you can afford to allow yourself to be bogged down in that. You can, I think, quite easily, But it changed. The following year it was challenged again and it got through, it got passed. And it's actually amazing how quickly a cultural change takes place. Once you get over the first, once it becomes the norm, in actual fact, people's concerns, the laugh for me always was people saying, you'll have all these women in and wanting their photograph taken with footballers and their photograph taken with managers. The most I ever see at the football writers are the men, all the guys, like guys, cousins and brothers and mates all hogging football. That's what I tend to see. But I think it's amazing that a cultural shift can take hold fairly quickly. In a positive way. And I honestly can't say I've ever felt anything untoward. I don't think anyone's ever said anything to me that's made me feel self-conscious. Maybe there were things said about me, I don't know. But I've never felt it, and I would also say that the football writers as a whole who work in this environment there's a kind of unique pressure to it, and I don't just mean in terms of your working environment, but in terms of juggling it with family commitments. It's a very peculiar industry at times for crossing over family commitments and things happening late at night, or you have to let people down, or you can't be somewhere. So I think there is a camaraderie that comes with people who understand those kind of hours. Yeah. So I have to say, I felt the people that I work with, the colleagues that I've worked with, not just in the newspapers I've worked, but in a wider sense, a fairly warm community. It's quite a dry sense of humour, and I think most of us understand the complexities involved in juggling the hours required to do the job.
I mean, I don't want to have a sweeping generalisation here of like football writers aren't always the best read, which is surprising for journalists, but I would say you're probably one of the better reads of the journalists, and I can probably pick some of the ones who I've had book conversations with.
You'd be surprised, I think. There's a few. Hugh MacDonald obviously was the literary editor of the Herald at one point, but I think most of us would probably read, maybe not to the same extent or the same degree. I mean, Hugh MacDonald's probably the toy in amongst us. I wouldn't be compare myself there, but books for me have been a constant all through my life. Books have been a constant from my earliest memories, and to now. I can't imagine not having a book. I can't imagine. I always have a book in my bag, always have a book at my bedside table, always have a book in the car just in case I'm stuck somewhere and I need something to read.
So maybe that's an indication then of the you've got so many books on the go, the agonies that, we've gone back and forth in terms of arranging this podcast. And when I did get your choice, and I know even as we speak, there's probably other titles running through. So if we start with the first question, which is a favourite book from your childhood.
First one I remember loving is a book called The Didacoy by Rumour Godden, which we read, I think, in primary 4. And I remember we were reading a chapter every afternoon. The teacher would read it out to us in class. You'd all sit down, the teacher reads a chapter, and I remember just having to go and get this book out of the library because I couldn't bear to have to wait and running through it. And it's funny. You're going back to 1984, 1985, so you're going back a considerable distance, 35 years or whatever, and so many of the references in that book remain prevalent today. It's about a girl who comes from the travelling community into this really small, close-knit English community, being the outsider, just feeling like the outsider, not just because you're not a part of a 2.2 family, but just really small details that mark you out as different. And I loved it. I absolutely adored it. I actually can still remember drawing the caravan. We had to draw this caravan that Kizzy lived in, and I actually can still remember what it looked like and all the detail of it. I think that would be the first book I remember being entranced by, and I reread it. And actually, when I had Eva, who's my eldest, I bought it so that I could give her it.
Because I was actually going to ask you that, given the fact it was obviously made such an indelible mark in you as a child. As your kids have got to that age, have you encouraged them to read it, or have you read it to them, or have you wanted them to kind of have that same love for it that you did?
They did. I gave it to I bought it when Eva, I think actually my husband bought it for me, for Eva, when Eva was born, and I don't think she ever took to it the way that I did. However, if we move on, Charlotte's Web is another one. Again, I remember reading an excerpt from Charlotte's Web in a comprehension in primary school. You used to have a small passage and then you'd have 6 questions.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I've got to read that, like going to the library and thinking, I've got to get this book out. And I read Charlotte's Web to Eva, and I think I traumatised both of us reading Charlotte's Web to Eva. We were both inconsolable at the end, and we've not watched E.T. But yeah, I think you do. I think the great thing about books is you always want to share it. I think the thing about a book is if you read it and you're enthused by it, you're desperate for someone to read it so you've got that to talk about.
Because I'm always curious about, as a parent, because I've told the story on this podcast before about my 3 who are all adults now. My oldest daughter Louise reads sometimes. Rebecca is the middle one, she's a voracious reader. Andrew is the youngest, doesn't read at all, even to the point he won't even read my books. Now I'm absolutely fine with that, but I know I've spoken to other parents who, not that they would be appalled or anything, but they find it hard to understand or accept that their kids wouldn't be into books.
Absolutely. I sometimes query the parentage of all my kids. Eva loves books. She reads all the time. Again, from earliest memory, she loved the book. When she was a toddler, I used to think it was because I had a baby and she would follow me about with the book, and I'd think this is because she knows I actually have to sit down and pay some attention to the child and not the baby, and I used to the beginning of mother's guilt, But she, from the minute that she could read, from going to school, she always read. And it's funny, she's a real observer, Eva. She's very quiet and she watches everything. So she loves reading, she loves writing, she's very creative, very arty, but hates sport, hates all kinds of sport, doesn't hates football, knows nothing about football, has no interest in football. I lost that one early on. My son is 9, Joseph is 9, who is a reluctant reader, but who's slowly coming into, he's just sort of picking up like the Diary of a Wimpy Kids and the David Williams and stuff. But by this age, Eva had got through, Harry Potter's, and so he wouldn't have the same appetite. However, he's football mad, so I'm thinking, well, like half of my influences are wearing off, and the wee one, the youngest one, Beth, likes a book. She likes a story still small enough to like being read to, and is just slowly beginning to read herself. I think she might be more like Eva. Joseph is very, very logical. He's a really logical boy, which is completely at odds with me. Very practical, and he loves maths. Just has a natural aptitude for numbers and maths, which I absolutely do not, and neither does Eva. So I think you do want to pass it on. I think especially if you've had a love for a book and something that's left its mark, you want to see if they share it. Although it's funny, I remember my mum giving me Anne of Green Gables and saying to me, I love this book, the nuns used to read it like that every afternoon teas, and I loved it, I could never wait. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to like something that you liked, and then going back and reading it, and I did enjoy it. But sometimes I think maybe it's just about asserting your independence, some way that you have to say, no, I'll find my own path. And funnily enough, I felt that with Eva. I remember buying some Judy Blume's because at 11, 12, 13 I loved all these Judy Blume books, and Eva was not captivated by them at all, which I can understand. So different worlds, different eras. Because
that takes us on to, you mentioned Judy Blume, and when I'd asked you your second choice, which would be a favourite book from your kind of more formative years. And although I know the name, it's not like books I was familiar with. Although I didn't realise that I think she's about 81 now. But she's also apparently, in particular America, there's a thing in certain states in America where books are constantly challenged if they're being taught in schools. And apparently she's one of the most challenged authors by people in America, because a lot of parents, probably particularly those fundamentalist evangelical communities, are uncomfortable with the kind of subjects that she's talking about, which makes me think there's obviously real merit in her
real
books.
Real validity to it. Yeah, for me, I think, like many people of our kind of generation who come from a very Catholic background, you don't have social media the way that you do now. And so there was a real education element to it, a social education element about things that just hadn't really been discussed, about first relationships, about sex, about an emotional awareness, about the first steps into relationships with people of the opposite sex, but done in a way that's very, very delicate. It's got a very even hand. She also though broached very complex subjects beyond that. There was like subjects about weight problems with girls and self-perception. If you think, most of these books are written in the 70s.
You mentioned about a book earlier on. I mean, that's still as relevant now
Yeah.
as it ever, probably even more so.
Yeah, absolutely. But I loved them, and to be fair, it goes in stages. I think there were books that would be very much designed for younger age groups at 10, 11 and 12, sort of end of primary, start of high school, and all the friendship roles and where do you fit in to that, which are all very interesting. And then going up, you know, it gets more serious. So certain books I would say wouldn't be appropriate just now for 12-year-olds, but it maybe explores first sexual relationships and things like that. But it wasn't things that we were discussing.
Yeah.
You know, it's not things that you're sitting down and discussing. Whereas I think now we'd all be fairly open about that, even with your kids, like you're talking about. I think culturally we've all changed a bit. I think in school they talk about much more things, whereas it opened my eyes to things that had never been really discussed with anyone at all. And I loved them. I absolutely loved them. Apart from the fact that some of it felt quite illicit, of course, I absolutely adored them. But it's also so fluent. It's beautifully written, and it's so heavy in dialogue, but authentic dialogue, that characters are plausible and well-rounded, and there's depth and scope to them that I really loved. I just remember by about second or third year, I think, there just wasn't a book by Judy Blume that I hadn't read, and so many of them have stayed with me. And when I think I bought Eva, Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret, which is just fantastic. It's the kid with all these problems, and her parents are divorcing or arguing, and she's writing these letters to God, like, you know, what do I do? And it's just fantastic. It's just it was a chat about things I had never heard out with adult conversation. And eavesdropping on adult conversation. These were things like even divorce. It wasn't really talked about hugely, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the fact, again, when I was just doing some research, I think 82 million copies of a book sold, and that tells you everything you need to know. But within your answer, as I say, when you were sending me back, there was a couple of also what you called your go-to books, which would again maybe stepping on from Judy Blume.
Yeah. That would be going probably when I just first started university. I studied English literature and history at Glasgow. It's funny, I was so close to not doing English, and I was reluctant to do English. I'm not entirely sure why. I really wanted to do psychology and history, and at Glasgow you pick 3 subjects. I was going to do psychology and history and philosophy, and there was a clash, so it ended up psychology and history was a big clash, and history was the one that I really wanted to do along with psychology, so I went for English, but I kept thinking, I've made the wrong choice here. I don't know if I want to study English. And of course I really enjoyed the course, and I actually enjoyed the literary side more than I enjoyed the history side, and it just opened my eyes to a world and a whole genre of books that I think I would never ever have read voluntarily. I think second year uni we had a compulsory course in Shakespeare. It was the first time I'd ever done any Shakespeare. I hadn't done Shakespeare at school. I'd seen Romeo and Juliet or read my brother's copy of Romeo and Juliet, but I'd never studied Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved it. I still love it. Right. I still think, God, the foresight and how we actually, none of us change. Like, you go through centuries and the same problems that befall us all are the problems that have plagued people through the ages.
I have a real, not being my bonnet, but we did Shakespeare, a couple of plays at school, and I hated them. And I think it was the language. And I always felt, subsequently when my kids were studying it, and if the play they were studying was on at the theatre, we went to see it, and I loved watching the play, and I always felt they were written to be watched rather than sat
to read. I think you're
studied.
Absolutely right. We had an amazing professor at uni, and I can't remember his name, but he brought it to life so vividly, and I think that's important too. I think if the person who's talking you through it has a very obvious enthusiasm and passion for it, it's hard to ignore it. But even things like all the sonnets, I loved them. Poetry, I never thought in my life I would have liked any of this stuff, so it was a real awakening for me about stuff. But the go-to book you reference is Great Expectations every time. I love it. I love everything about it. I love the language, I love the way it's written, I love the story. It was actually written as a as a journalism piece. It was actually written as an instalment in a newspaper, so it's very theatrical. Like every chapter has this real cliffhanger. It's almost like a soap opera, like, because that was people's entertainment. So you're putting this in the paper.
And that's how he was earning his money. It
And
wasn't
that's
as
how
a
you would-
one-off.
exactly.
Yeah.
So these chapters end with great drama every time, so that you're going back to see what happens. But again, I adored it. I just the unrequited love aspect of it. But Joe Gargery for me is just the absolute solid. The man you want the man that you want them to be.
Because I always feel with Dickens, like, again, a lot of maybe what would be considered classic literature, and sometimes it can be seem a bit off-putting. But actually, once you actually, particularly, I think somebody like Charles Dickens, as you say, that kind of storytelling element. Once you're in the books, they're absolutely brilliant.
I think if you can get over your own prejudice about it. When I was at school, I had read Hard Times for my RPR, I think, and I hadn't hugely enjoyed it, but I enjoyed it more as I went into it. I enjoyed it more as I wrote my stuff, and I had a greater understanding of it. I enjoyed it more. So when we came to university and we were given this great expectations, but I always remember coming home on the subway and starting to read it on the subway and just thinking, I just couldn't put it down. Could not put it down. It's just,
to be fair, you'd just be going around in a circle.
Loved it, absolutely adored it, and I don't know when the last time was I read it now, but it's a book that I go back to every now and then, even just to read some of it, even just to go in, and I love the start of it, absolutely love the beginning of it, and Pip and his, I think we've all felt like that at some point in our life, like out of kilter in a social situation, and you're feeling clumsy and your language feels off. I think everyone can identify with that at some point in your life.
Because it was interesting, the other book that you mentioned was Crime and Punishment, and I think it took me about 4 or 5 attempts to read it, and I kept getting stolen at the same bit, and I don't know if it was just, particularly, with the Russian names, there was like the same character had about 4 different derivatives of the name. Eventually I managed to push through, and I knew a couple of people who absolutely loved the book, and I thought, right, well, I'm going to eventually get it, and I got to the end, I went, oh, that's it. I was underwhelmed.
I had this sort of black and purple copy of Crime and Punishment. It was a second-hand copy given to me by someone else with this tiny print, and it was really quite light. So I went on a girls' holiday. I think I was maybe 17 or 18, 19, somewhere around that kind of age. And I always took a pile of books. I'll take that because it's really light, can get it in our hand luggage and stuff. And I remember somebody around the pool saying to me, what are you reading? And just being aware of what an arse I must have looked like, like sitting reading Crime and Punishment. But it made quite an impression, and I enjoyed it. But my other one, the one that I really love again, is Far From the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. I love Thomas Hardy. The first Thomas Hardy I read was Tess. I'm sure we've all covered Tess at some point in high school or whatever, and I loved Tess. Once I got into it, it took me forever, maybe having to get past the languages. I think I might have been about 15 or 16, having to get past the language initially and open your mind to it a bit. But I loved the story of Tess, and then when I read Far From the Madding Crowd, it blew me away, absolutely blew me away. And I still go back, I still think Gabriel Oak. I think I still have a fancy for Gabriel Oak.
Well, I have to say that, on the back of these podcasts, I've never read any Thomas Hardy, and you're about the second or third person who has absolutely raved about the book.
I just think his vision at that point in life for things that were going on that, again, wouldn't be talked about at all, and I loved it.
Well, you are listening to the Read All About It podcast with me, Paul Cuddihy, and my guest in this episode, the football writer Alison McConnell. Alison, we are on to your third choice, and that is a book that you would recommend to anyone. And again, there's to be fair, you actually gave me, rather than specific books, there was certain authors that you suggested.
I think there are certain authors that would be ubiquitous. I love, now, over the last 10 years or so, maybe more, I read a lot of crime fiction. I love crime fiction, partly because I think it's fast. It's really fast-paced. I don't have a huge amount of time now. I'm not sure I would have the time, for example, to sit down and get through tests, because my life feels so stop-start. By the time you get an hour at night, I'm falling asleep. So I think certain books you need a holiday, or you need a run at it. You need to get into it to really immerse yourself in the book. So I've read loads of crime fiction, I think, because it's relatively easy to read, and I enjoy it, I love it. But I think in that respect there are certain authors that just have a universal appeal. So I love Anne Tyler. You, I think, were the first person to direct me towards Anne Tyler. I think our novels are all set in Baltimore. They seem to be about nothing and about everything simultaneously, but delivered in a very fluent and accessible way. Again, it's not seamless and lives aren't perfect. It just seems to bring in the fractured element of families so often.
Do you know, the first time I read Anne Tyler, it was on the back of, I think I'd read a Roddy Doyle interview, because at the time I loved Roddy Doyle books, and he cited her as one of his influences, one of those people that he thought, if I could write even half as well as Anne Tyler, and I thought, well, if I like him. And then as soon as I started reading, I can't remember which, I think it might have been Breathing Lessons was the first one, and I was totally blown away, and I just thought, her writing's just perfect.
It's excellent. And it has I think, like all great practitioners of their art, whether it's a footballer or an author, I think it looks effortless. It looks so easy to do, which should be an indicator of someone's talent. I think when something reads like that, you know how difficult it is to do. That's a talent. It's a genuine gift. Fun enough, Roddy Doyle would be another one that I would dread to get in. Actually, Paddy Clark, might have made it into my formative list. I think I read Paddy Clark maybe when I was about 17 or 18.
That is a brilliant book.
Paddy Clark is beautiful. It's just so lovely.
It's actually got an ending that takes your breath away.
Yeah.
Once you find out why the title's called Paddy Clark.
And the Barrytown trilogy. I loved all those books. I probably read the Barrytown trilogy the same holiday I read Crime and Punishment, just
to get a wee bit of poolside credibility back.
But loved Roddy Doyle. The other ones that I would say for books I would recommend is Denise Mina. And I know you and I have spoken about Denise Mina. I feel like I've turned into Denise Mina's stalker, because whenever there are any events at the Mitchell Library or through I Write, a friend and I often go, and we've been to umpteen of these events.
I would say to people, especially people who aren't used to going to book events, if you get a chance to go and see Denise, go, because she's brilliantly entertaining and
so warm.
When my daughter Rebecca was at Strathclyde Uni, I think it was first or second year, she was studying some English at the time, and Denise was appearing. And I said to Rebecca, go along and see her, because she's brilliant, she's really entertaining. And she went along and she really loved it. But she said there was only like about a dozen people there. And I thought, there's all these, I don't know how many students are studying English, and you've got this brilliant Scottish writer who's just brilliantly entertaining and on their doorstep.
The Garnet Hill trilogy, I think I actually couldn't, I've enjoyed all of her books. I loved the Garnet Hill trilogy. The Paddy Meehan series at the beginnings of it, I thoroughly enjoyed, and I think, again, it's just so accessible and easy to read. I think I would definitely recommend, if someone said to me, I'm just looking for something to pick up that I know is going to take me immediately, I don't have to bear with it, or I don't need any patience, I think Denise Mina would definitely be among my recommendations for them.
Because the other one you mentioned was Don Winslow, and the first one of his that I read was The Power of the Dog, and it was through one of my colleagues at Celtic, Tony Conley, and I think we'd all had a conversation one day in one of the press boxes about Don Winslow, and he'd given me the book, and sometimes you see a book and it's a big doorstopper and you could be kind of intimidated by it. As soon as you read it, it was one of those books that you cannot put down. It's absolutely
I think The Power of the Dog actually might have been the first Don Winslow that I read too. Someone gave me Don Winslow, now I'm not sure who it was. I think it would either be Ewan Graham or Hugh. Gave me a loan or recommended it to me, and I think The Power of the Dog was the first one I read too, and I loved it. But The Cartel for me is outstanding, and he was a journalist too. He's an investigative journalist for a long time, and I think so much of it, there's so much depth.
There's parts of it I'm not quite sure if is it fact or fiction, because it is so detailed, and then you see a news report,
absolutely,
and it's mirroring it.
Well, I think so much of that comes from his his years as a journalist and the research that gone into it. I think it's unparalleled in terms of the knowledge of that whole environment. He's astounding, and I also love his boldness now on social media. He's challenging Donald Trump all the time. He's challenging everything that's coming out of the White House.
Because I think he offered, was it not something like $150,000?
And Stephen King,
if the White House would actually hold a proper press conference.
Stephen King's another one I'd recommend. I think Stephen King's an outstanding writer too. I think there can be a snobbery about crime writing, that people are quick to dismiss it as pulp. I think it's very unfair.
Well, do you know what's really interesting? Because I think you're absolutely right, and I spoke to Willie Maley, Professor Willie Maley at Glasgow Uni for this podcast, and he's a big Stephen King fan. He even supervised a PhD on Stephen King. But also, I think the 2020 Booker Prize, Lee Child is among the judges, which is really an interesting departure, because crime books don't get considered in the same vein. And actually, you've as you say, you do a lot of crime books. There's a lot of top quality writing within
excellent,
that.
Absolutely excellent. Right, I mean, I would say there's no need for a line between real literature and crime literature. Some of it's exceptional. Mm-hmm. It really is exceptional. And it's funny though, crime writing attracts a huge percentage of female readers. I'm not sure what that's about, but there's when you turn up at these events, it's nearly always women that are there. It's, do
you think some of that's to do, because anything I've ever read in terms of readership surveys, women do read more books than men?
Yeah, but even for crime, I think crime fiction's unusual in that it's so heavily weighted towards a female audience at times, and yet it's not always reflected in the character. Nearly all the protagonists are male protagonists, which is another one why Denise Mine is quite different, in that she has very powerful female characters too. Also, it's worth a note, I've not read any of them yet, but Lisa Gray, who's a football writer, she's a football writer for PA, has actually just released a book, a crime writer's book. I've not had a chance to catch up with it, but the last I heard it sold something like 150,000 copies.
Was that not through Amazon, and they were so impressed with it, they've really pushed it.
Yeah, and they've done, she's got a 3-book deal.
Obviously that whole sort of Scottish noir that William McIlvanney cited is beginning. There's a real tradition of crime.
Oh yeah,
crime books.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think Lisa's are based in America, but I know exactly what you're saying. There is a real, you think of Al McDermott too, like there's a real Ian Rankin obviously, a real clutch of Scottish crime writers. Rankin's another one I would recommend.
See, the list is never ending.
It's not. And also,
should we do an Alison McConnell podcast part 2, and you can just choose 5 completely different?
Elmer Leonard. I love Elmer Leonard I think his dialogue is exceptional. It's almost, you actually have to tune your ear to it, if that makes sense. You have to really...
There's actually anybody who's listening to this who's an aspiring writer. There's Elmer Leonard does a thing, I think it's his top 10 tips for writing.
Right.
Read them before you want to because they are so brilliant, so precise. And even things like, which a thing I do now is, he said, when people talk, they said, so he said, she said, they don't, your dialogue explains how they express it. You don't need to tell people or stuff. And
he's quite like Roddy Doyle. He's quite like Roddy Doyle like that. The way it is presented. Yeah. And there's an authenticity to it that I think is very, very difficult to get right.
But as you were saying earlier on about Ann Tyler, it looks effortless. It reads effortlessly, but you know how difficult that is to.
Absolutely. If
it was that easy, we'd all be doing it.
Exactly.
If we go from books that you would recommend, and I think we were almost going through a library there. Now the opposite end of that spectrum is a book that I couldn't pay to read again.
The Daily Triffids. Hated it. Absolutely hated it. I hate that whole genre. I hate sci-fi. I hate that. It's just nonsense.
But
it
surely
does
there'll be
nothing for me.
There'll be people who are listening to this. They'll be shouting out names of. So, for example, I don't read a lot of sci-fi books, but I did read some Ian S. Banks books, which were actually.
God, Espidar Street's another.
Which actually he's written some really good.
That Ian S. Banks was his sci-fi name, and I love Ian Banks. I've read all Ian Banks. Espidar Street would be one of my favourites.
Can I recommend a sci-fi book that I think you would enjoy? So that Michel Faber, who wrote The Crimson and the Petal, he wrote a book called The Book of Strange New Things, which is basically it's a missionary who goes to an alien world and is kind of trying to preach to convert them. It's a brilliant. If you take away from the fact it's sci-fi, you don't like sci-fi, it's brilliantly written.
The only one that I would say I've kind of crossed into it would be a couple of Margaret Atwood's, where she's
So kind of
seems
dystopian
like
future.
I suppose the Handmaid's Tale, and then there was Oryx and Craig. But it just doesn't, it's not a genre that I would ever choose to read. And now I'm very discerning with my time because I don't have a lot of it. I need a book that I like. I have no time for the come to me with sci-fi. I remember one time on holiday, one of my friends who's a scientist, my friend Carol has a different mind from us, and she was reading this tome, I think maybe like 750 words or something like that, like ploughing through this absolutely humongous book, sci-fi of course, and I said to her, how's your book? And she said, it's just getting good. And it's just getting good. What page are you on? She said 628. And I think that's just sci-fi, and it's just it just doesn't take me at all. Another one I remember years ago, Matthew Lindsay, who I sat beside at the Evening Times sports desk, recommending a book to me, and he raved about it, you've got to read this, got to read it, and sci-fi, and I can't even remember the name of it, but he still goes on about the fact that I didn't like it, and I keep thinking, how can you possibly have enjoyed that? It's nonsense.
See, I was like you, I have to be honest, of like, I just thought it's sci-fi, it's not for me, it's all gobbledygook, and I forced myself to read a couple of Ian S. Banks books because I really liked his books as Ian Banks, and I kind of had to tell myself, right, just take it as the book and the story. All the other stuff about the kind of world, it's like the culture world that he created, and it's all these different books. And there was one or two of them actually, as novels with stories and plots and characters, were actually, I really enjoyed them. And it took me by, it didn't make me start going through the whole genre, but actually, I kind of felt a better person from having said, right, okay.
You've tried it? Tried it once. I don't know. The other one I remember probably being about 14 or 15, and I think I might just have read The Outsiders, which I absolutely loved. That's a real cult teenage book, and there was a movie too. And God, I think I could still quote it verbatim. But then reading in English, getting Laurie Lee's When I Walked Out One Midsummer's Morning, and thinking, God, it's almost like the opening scene of The Outsiders, and when I walked out from the darkness of the movie house. And I'm thinking, oh, this would be great, and reading it and thinking, what is this? What is this?
Well, Chris Dolan, who was the very first guest on this podcast, and when he's listening to this, he'll be shouting at you because not only did he love the book, but he effectively kind of recreated that journey.
Wow.
To Spain, busked around Spain, and is writing a book based on his journey and on the kind of changing face of Spain, based on that book, which he absolutely loved.
I do think it was a real immaturity on my part at that age. I suspect if I had to go back and read it again now, I would have a much greater appreciation of it. But I think from this preparing yourself for The Outsiders and opening Laurie Lee, it's two worlds colliding.
I mean, when you mentioned there about Matthew Lindsay, your colleague recommending a book to you and then you hating it. See, when people recommend a book to you,
still wears a grudge about this.
Well, I was going to, like sometimes when people recommend a book to you, and you would be the same if you recommend a book to me or anyone else, it's because A, you love the book, but also you think that I would love the book.
Yeah.
See, when you don't, did you have any qualms about saying to him, by the way, that was rubbish?
He kept asking me, did you read it? And I was like, I can't read it. I can't get past the first 2 chapters, have it back. And he kind of took it a bit personally.
Because like some of the books that you really love, if you say, right, you need to read this, and somebody reads it, and
it's like a personal rejection, isn't it? It's like
a
little part of your soul. There's a part of your soul invested in that. Yeah, I think there might be. I'm going to have to go and apologise to Matthew.
But no sci-fi for
no
you.
Sci-fi, absolutely no sci-fi. I think too, I don't know if I'm just at a particular stage in my life where you're working all the time and your nights are spent ferrying kids from one place to another and doing dinners and life's busy. I always like to read before I go to sleep. Like I've always read for a bit before going to sleep, but now I have the the competition of Netflix, because I love a box set and I like an hour at night with a glass of wine or a cup of tea, depending where we are in the week, if I can start cracking open the wine, because it just gives you an hour a piece. Quite discerning. I don't watch a lot of TV at all, but I like a box set. So just trying to squeeze in reading as well, which is why I'm always tired in the morning, because I work too much and then I'm up late reading as well. But
do you ever watch any sci-fi box sets?
No, I've no time for that.
Fair enough. Well, we're on to the fifth and final question, and that's either the last book that you've read or the book that you're currently reading.
I'm reading a few just now, like most people probably always have a couple in the go.
I'm the opposite. I only ever have one in the go. I don't have the concentration to split my...
Mine is sheer laziness. That if one book's downstairs and one's upstairs, I'll pick a book off the shelf, or sometimes if I'm waiting on someone calling me back or whatever. But I've recently discovered Laura Lippman, who is just... I'm not sure where I've been to have missed Laura Lippman, but loving her stuff. And Megan Abbott is another one that I've really...
Is it the
American?
Crime?
Yeah, but fantastically written. And so I've got a whole pile of books that I got for Christmas that I'm working through, but that would be one of them. Another one that I've just got, my husband bought me at the weekend, was a book called The Heart's Invisible Furies, which is set in Ireland. I've only just started it, but it's got a very promising beginning about quite complex subjects too.
Because I was glad you mentioned that, because I read that last year, and when you'd mentioned it I went back and I always remembered the very beginning. So I've actually, I'll read the opening sentence, because it actually, if you read this opening sentence and don't want to read the book... Yeah,
well, it's funny, this is why I end up reading multiple books. So Friday night I came in from work and my husband said, I bought you a present, and it was I got some books and I thought you would like that. And so I basically poured a glass of wine. My husband was taking my son out to football. I thought, just, you know what it's like, open the book, sat down, opened the book, and I read the first sentence, and I never moved for an hour and a half, because it just takes you.
Well, I'll read this opening sentence. This is from The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. Long before we discovered that he had fathered 2 children by 2 different women, one in Drimoleague and one in Clonakilty, Father James Monroe stood in the altar of the Church of Our Lady, Star of the Sea, in the parish of Galeen, West Cork, and denounced my mother as a whore. And I remember reading, and that whole scene...
Shocking. The first scene is shocking.
The scene, actually, because when you mentioned that, it immediately brought it back to me how
cruel,
dramatic
the cruelty of it.
It's a absolutely beautiful, stunning book.
Yeah. Well, my husband had said to me, someone, I think someone he worked with or a friend, someone had recommended it to him, and he'd said, I think you'll really enjoy this. And I read it Friday night. I read the first couple of chapters and I was blown away by it, which is why I always end up with multiple books on the go.
I'm always I have to be honest, I'm always impressed when people have more than one book on the go, because I say I have to just concentrate solely on one, otherwise I'll never finish anything. Yeah,
I do. I don't read a lot of... I have to say now I read pretty much just fiction. I don't read a lot of historical things, which I think I probably should read more of. So I maybe dip in and out of things like that are non-fiction, which I think I always need a fiction book to go in tandem with. Not that I've been doing much of it of late, I would have to say. But no, books have been... I couldn't imagine my life without a book.
Well, that takes me on to what would be my final question as we're getting to the end of the podcast, is obviously books have always been part of your life. You've been a writer for a long, long time. Have you ever thought of actually... Or have you ever had a go at writing fiction yourself?
When I was here, before I had the kids, I done a creative writing class at Glasgow Uni, which I loved. I don't think I've ever thought about it seriously. I don't think I'd ever be good enough. I think as you get older, we all think we've got a book in us, or you see aspects of your life is almost like coming through the pages of a book. My family, funnily enough, one of my sister-in-laws is always on at me, like, you should write a book, but I'd never felt a pull for it, I would have to say. I think maybe it's a bit like football, maybe I'm better being an observer than a participant. But yeah, I love good writing.
Never say never.
I would never say never. I just can't ever imagine a point in my life where I'll have time to do anything other than what I do now. And I'm a contented reader. I love to read it. It would definitely be one of the ways that I relax, and I always have done. I always remember running off the school bus at primary school one Friday afternoon, absolutely bucketing, and running home because I had a library book in my bag and thinking I just can't wait to I'm just going to lie on the sofa and read this book. And I still have that feeling. I love the feeling of a new book, which is why I have too many. I have every so often.
You can never have too many books.
You can if you live in a small house that you share with 4 other people, but I love the sense of anticipation and just the removal of it, that you become absorbed in someone else's story to the point where your own becomes on hold for a wee while. And I think it's such a gift. Marianne Keyes, funny enough, another writer that I would say, Marianne Keyes, who would probably go down as chick lit again, which would be quite unfairly seen as a real snobby element to it. Marianne Keyes is like that. I find her a really, really strong writer, a good writer, and very funny, which again, as you know yourself, being funny on paper is a tremendously difficult thing to do. I love her books. It's another author that I would say, if I know she has a book coming out, I'll make a point of pre-ordering it or getting it when it comes out, and I love that too, knowing there's a new book coming out.
And you're almost guaranteed quality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or you're going to enjoy it. It's almost like coffee with one of your old pals, isn't it? Like you're going to enjoy it. You're going to go and just be absorbed in something else. For a while I felt that actually Denise Mina's last book I got and kept for going on holiday. We went on holiday at the end of June, and I think for the first 3 days I never spoke to anyone. It was like just leave me and let me read. And I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to give, and I'm very appreciative of books in my life would be significantly worse without them.
That's the perfect way to end this podcast. Thanks very much, Alison,
Thank you
for joining us. If you want to read any of Alison's choices, you can go to my website, www.paulcuddihy.com, where I think there'll be about 10 pages worth of choices from everything that Alison said. But listen, thanks very much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Read All About It podcast, and I'd love to hear what you thought about it. You can get in touch via Twitter at ReadAllAbout20, on Instagram at ReadAllAboutItPodcast, or you can send an email to readallaboutit@paulcuddihy.com. If you've enjoyed the podcast, subscribe, leave a review and spread the word. If you haven't enjoyed it, say nothing to anybody. But I do hope you can join me, Paul Cuddihy, next time on the Read All About It podcast. And in the meantime, keep reading.